Hi, welcome to this portion of the Takeoff training that will be dedicated to generating data inside our Takeoff program, specifically the UD window. But because of all the content that's going to go with this portion of the video, this training, I'll be breaking down into digestible chunks. So in this series of training, we're going to learn about the UD window interface. We're also going to learn how to assign project details to the data that's gathered from the server. Then we're going to learn how to create data in the UD window practically from scratch. We'll learn things from tag details, tag use, parts / miscellaneous parts like gaskets, and how to do layout on the parts for the BIM model. Then lastly, we'll show you how we would normally do things, is how to copy and modify existing data to create new ones. That's probably the most efficient way in terms of creating data. Okay. So with that said, let's begin with the first video of this series, is the UD window interface overview. Okay, so before we begin, let's go over this little flowchart of connecting the dots from the Revit program to our Takeoff program. So inside your Revit model, you would normally assign a bunch of Revit families in the grid line, right? That makes up the unit or the elevation. Those Revit family has a specific name that's already stored inside of our data in the server. Those gets retrieved and populates inside your UD window. And inside the detail area, you'll see the name of the Revit family. And then it'll directly go into the part use area, which you'll see later. That generates our taglines. And inside those taglines has data, which is stored inside the assembly / miscellaneous area in the UD window, which has our parts and our miscellaneous parts like fasteners and gaskets for takeoff. Okay, so keep this little flowchart in mind, and with that said, let's begin. Okay, so again, for this video, it's just going to be talking about the UD window interface, so there's really no exercise accompanying this training video, so you guys can just watch. So over here on the upper left, you'll have your job number. You'll also have the project name. Okay. And over here on your right side, you'll have this little hand button right here. If you click on it, it runs the command UD. So those of you who've forgotten, if you run the UD command in a blank page, it will bring up the UD window. And also right next to it, you have the refresh button. So over here on the left side, you have the detail area. Okay, under here, the first column you'll see is the detail number. So that directly correlates to your shop drawings detail numbers in relation to, say, your Revit family, right? So if you can kind of go over 2 columns over, you'll see Revit resource, which is your Revit family name. So you can kind of see how a Revit family name should have some type of correlating detail for the projects. Okay. And you may look at your UD window right now and see that under detail numbers you haven't filled out anything yet. It's probably listed out as 1/ the family name. So we're going to go over that in a later video on how to assign the details. So just bear with me here. Okay, and right next to the detail number is the reference detail. Okay, so a lot of times for the reference detail, we like to point certain details to other similar details, right? So you don't have to have so many overlapping data, right, in terms of uses. So a good example would be this DAS W75 5262 002. Right? And if you follow the reference detail, it's 2/551R. So if you go over here, 2 on 551R, you sort this, is this one right here. So it's pointing to a typical male vertical. Okay. Now with that example in mind, so if you pull up the shop drawings, and I already have it pulled up here, see how your left detail shows your W7552-62-002, which is essentially this male vertical right here. And if you look over to the right, this is your DAS W7552-62, which is this. Now, if you pull the two families out together in the AutoCAD and from the parts library, you'll see that it's exactly the same thing, right? And I'll go over why we even have a DS family in a later video. But in this case, that's what referencing details are for. So when you have a very similar condition, normally we'll point to the typical condition in the project just to avoid duplicating data, and then maintaining it would be a lot harder. Because imagine if I have a DS family here, and I have this bunch of data here, like similar to this. If something changes, now I have to change both, right? Okay, so that takes care of the reference detail, I mean. And then the last column in the detail area is the description. And this is pretty self-explanatory. You would just put down a little description describing what the family is about, or the details about. So normally we would put the project name in the front, and then with a dash, and then a little description of what the detail is. Okay, so let's move on over to the right side of the detail, which is just the part use area. So under part use, this column right here is going to be filled out with your tagline name, and also with what we call a rule. So normally for our rules, we want to just have it based off of intersections. So for instance, you have a corner vertical right here, right? So CRNR stands for corner. So you have a corner vertical here, and the rule at the end is reading head to head. So meaning it's going to intersect the head, right? And then right underneath it, you'll have corner and then sill to sill. So you may want to wonder, like, why is it just intersections and why won't we build like a sill to a head and so on and so forth? It's just for ease of maintenance. If you have a bunch of different combinations, it's going to be a little difficult to maintain. And those combinations that are usually stored in this retainer right here, because every time you create a rule, it'll create this rule retainer right here. So the more rules, source rules that we call these source rules, by the way, the more of these you create, the longer this list becomes. So over here on this right side, if you click on these, you'll see the rules area, and you can kind of see the different combinations that it gives purely based on the different source conditions that you provided the program with. Okay. So over on the right side, you'll have the description. So again, that's pretty self-explanatory. These retainers are usually created automatically after you create a source condition. All right, so you don't have to fill those out. Okay, and over to the right side, you'll have a column saying vertical. Okay, so you're going to have to check this box when you're actually doing a vertical part. So since this is a corner vertical, you'll have the vertical box checked. So for the sake of explanation, let's go over to a horizontal. So you can kind of see here, it's the Inviso horizontal. So if you click into here, you'll notice that any parts inside here, you won't have the vertical box checked. So this plus button on the right side is going to come in handy later when you do layouts, so keep that in mind. Over on the right side is your pocket. It's basically the distance between the face of the system to your glass pocket. Those will be filled out when you're doing layouts. An angle. Okay. So these are usually filled out as well during layout. And the rules here, you already kind of known from my explanation on the rules container. Okay. So next, let's move on to the assembly area. Okay, over in the assembly area down here, let's actually click on an actual part. You'll see part number. So this is correlating with the part number that's in the detail or the Revit family. So you can kind of see here it's W755106. Usually it's 1 to 1. So obviously your part for that, your main part for that family would be the same family name, usually W755106. So a sake of explanation, let's go into horizontal. You'll have W752102. Let's pull another one. So this one is W755263, W755263. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. W753170, W753170. So I think you get the point. So over here on the right side, you'll see description. Okay. Those are usually filled out on the server, or should be at least. And then on the right side, you'll see a shop use checkbox. You would check those if the part is considered a shop use. Now you may think, well, isn't all of them a shop use? No. So if it's part of like the unit assembly, if it's assembled during the unit, like assembly portion, you wouldn't have this box checked, right? So we'll expand on that a little bit more later, but imagine you have a attach angle or some kind of clip that gets pre-attached to the vertical or something like that. You'll normally have this box checked, okay? Over to the right, you'll have the box hole, okay? Right next to it is clips. Now you would want this box checked normally on your main part that receives an attachment, right? So this is a corner vertical, so if I want like an angle attaching to it from reading from a different tagline, a perpendicular tagline, which you'll get into later too, you'll have to have this clip box checked. Okay. Right next to it would be the box attached. So this is usually the part that you're going to attach it onto something, right? So for a better explanation, let's go on to our horizontals. So horizontals usually gets quote unquote attached to our verticals. So you can kind of see our horizontals, and it has the attachment box checked. So it doesn't really get physically attached to it during fabrication. It's just, you have to show some type of hole layout for the fabricator to drill, right? So you have to attach this horizontal to show the hole layout, but you'll get into that a little later. So for now, if you want to attach something that's perpendicular to the main part, then you have to have that attachment with the attachment box checked. So next we'll have this plus sign right next to the attach box. This plus sign is the same as this plus sign over on the right, but just specifically for individual parts. Okay, it's for layout essentially. Right next to that, you have the column invert. Next we have the invert box. So these would be checked off during. Okay. Next we'll move on to the invert box. right next to the plus sign. So this box will be automatically filled in when you do your parts layout. So we can let the parts layout portion of the video to describe what it is for. Same as offset. Displacement, this is related to the bin model. If you move a certain part in the bin model, you kind of rotate it around, you'll put some type of displacement there on the part. And then right next to that, you'll have your angle, setback, all deals with the parts layout. Then right next to that, you'll have finish. So that's directly related to the finish of your part. So normally main extrusions, the finish is paint. So for explanation, sometimes you'll have angles that are allodyne or even mill finish and whatnot. Next to that, you have your fab column. This is your fab template name that lives inside your dies folder. We'll get into that later. Adjustment top or adjustment left, meaning if you look at your tagline, say you've drawn a tagline at 60 inches, your adjustment here is going to deduct it. In this case, it's going to deduct 1 3/8 from the left side. And right next to that would be your adjustment bottom, which is your right side. So same thing. In this case, you'll have an adjustment of 1 3/8 from the right side. So if you have a tagline that's drawn at 60 inches, then you'll deduct 1 3/8 from both sides. All right. So on the opposite side of that, if you have a positive adjustment, then you obviously add to that tagline, right? So next to those columns, you'll see the fixed column, which is your fixed length. So if I specifically want to drive this particular part use with this particular part to be, say, 100 inches, always, right? You just type in the number here to be. It'll always be 100 inches, regardless, disregarding the length of your tagline. Okay. On center, and then auto cut. This is a checkbox. So normally we want this box checked if you have mitered parts. So horizontals, there's a chance for mitering them when you come to a corner or segment of walls. So you kind of usually want this box to be checked. If you don't have this box checked, your part cannot be mitered or tilt cut or anything like that. And then you have your miscellaneous box. So let's go over to your last area of your UD window. So in this area, you'll have miscellaneous over here on the bottom. So inside miscellaneous, you'll have a miscellaneous item, right? And then this here would be your miscellaneous part numbers, right? This is your fasteners, your gaskets, your setting blocks, and so on and so forth, right? And this is related to the part use that you're in, right? So say for instance, right now you have horizontal 250, invert to invert selected, this specific part right here, and then you have this miscellaneous item related to this. So if you click into a different part use, so in this case it's a face stop, you have a different part, you have a different miscellaneous. Okay. So let's go back to the horizontal. So right next to the miscellaneous part name or miscellaneous item column, you have the description. Again, self-explanatory, just to describe what that part is. And then right here, you'll have the division column. Here you have little area drop-down menu that tells you, you have a few things to select from. So if this is a fastener, right, you can either do per part, per hole, per foot. This is usually for gaskets, right? And then on center, so meaning if you have like an on center fastener, then per light. So the Takeoff program will read every single individual light and then plant the fasteners according to the count of the light. And then total. And total is pretty self-explanatory. Right next to that column, you have quantity. So how many total? Then for this one on the right, you have quantity top or quantity left, right? So you have 3 on the left side, and then on the quantity bottom, 3 on the right. So if you're familiar with our W75 system, our horizontals are usually screw splined into our verticals. So if you look at the detail, it's usually shown with 3 fasteners. So let's go and pull up a detail. So let's go into your Bluebeam session. Let's just pull up a random horizontal detail. So if you look at this horizontal detail, you'll notice that there's 3 fasteners right here. And this calls out here 3 on each end. So with that said, you notice that it's 3 on the left, 3 on the right. Okay. So anchor type, right here, that is usually related to your sill runners. So let's go bring up a sill runner family. It's your sill runner. So you see here, anchor type, you have A and D's, right? Different anchor types. So you may wonder why, you have different anchor types. You may use the same sill runner. So if you were using the detail as an example, right? Okay, so let's go over to the sill detail. Let's go to 601. Just close this. So if you look at this sill detail or sill chart detail, you'll notice that we're using the same sill family or sill chart family, which is SW75 1116001 P075 over here on the left detail, as well as over here on the right detail. But you'll also notice that the fastener call out for the anchor is different. Right here we're using a 34 BP, and right here we're using a 13 HP. Okay, so having this column right here, anchor type, is directly related to the different scenarios that we may have in a project, right? So this allows us for flexible room for the variance in the anchor use. Okay, right next to that, you'll have a shop use column. So sometimes we may have fasteners that go into the that should be shipped directly to the field for field use, and then sometimes they need to be shipped into shop use. This is just really for material takeoffs, how to separate them, and how to package them and ship them out to its correct location. Over here on your right, you have the finish, and then right next to that, you'll have the vendor. These should be already filled out all based on the server. Okay, with that said, one last thing that you should know is just this button right here, the apply button. So that is your what is it? The button that you need to hit every time you make some kind of change. So you need to make sure you always hit apply. All right, every time you make a change, unless you don't intend on making that change. With that said, this takes care of the overview of the UD window interface. So in the next video, I'll be showing you how we would assign detail numbers that relates to our Revit family. Okay, so stay tuned.